Chapter 12 The Truth Will Out. The doctor's stream of comment was almost obscured by the warble of televerification assemblers as the small party of miscreants and heroes reappeared on a platform inside the Planet 11 Mineralogical Survey Base. The transmat chamber was similar to the one used aboard the Rock, but smaller, darker, and with a lower ceiling. It was sited at the end of one of the three arms that led from the central dome of the base. Gjork stepped forward to greet his superiors.
Transfer complete.
Charlie nodded and stepped from the platform.
Good. Where are the others?
Other lads in survey room as you order, Mr. Charles, with gear waiting for you.
There's no time to waste,
said Zaius. She turned her blank glare on the four prisoners.
What are you going to do with these?
Don't mind us, the doctor said. Shut up, you bug-eyed freak. Eddie spoke evenly, but the tip of his revolver nudged the doctor's ribs. You've done well to get this far alive. Shame to spoil it all now, eh?
We'll lock them away for the moment, said Charlie. You know this place, Zaius. You see to it. We've got work to do.
He straightened his suit and set off down the corridor towards the dome. Eddie tapped the doctor's chin with the handle of his revolver and followed his brother. Zaius cursed her allies in an obscure mutant tongue as they departed. Creative differences? Queried Romana. The silver mask regarded her with disinterest.
I will kill you shortly. You are unimportant.
She turned to the nearest Ogron.
Follow the signs to storage area 3. Put them inside and lock the door. Do you understand?
The Ogron nodded.
Yes, Zaius.
He prodded Stokes with his rifle.
Move, fat one.
The artist shuffled off in compliance. The doctor and Romana, mindful of the assembled firepower of the surrounding Ogrons, got into file behind him. The doctor stopped at the door and looked out through a large viewport streaked with dark blue grime. The valley outside was thick with dirty gases. The plastic glass of the viewport thrummed in time to the rumblings of a close storm.
Oh, what very charming weather, said the doctor. So, this is Planet 11. Stale, flat, but perhaps not so unprofitable, eh, Zaius?
The Ogron pushed him on before Zaius had the chance to reply. She placed a hand on Pierpoint's shoulder as he made to follow the others.
Not you.
He met her smooth, silver face without fear.
Your strategy failed.
No, I have decided that I want you with me. There may be unpleasantness with the brothers.
She reached inside her tunic and brought out a small silver pistol.
I liberated this from an Ogron.
She handed it to him.
Of course I have no need of it, but you may find it useful.
Pierpoint tucked the weapon into his waistband.
You trust me?
He said, watching her all the while.
If you turn your back, I can kill you. I have reason to.
She turned and walked on.
I trust your ambition. Without me, you will never be able to activate Helicon.
The Ogrons hurried the doctor, Romana, and Stokes along the narrow and oppressively low-ceilinged corridors of the base. The only sounds were the distant crackle of shifting gas clouds and the barely discernible hum of the life support systems. The recycled air was still and smelt sour. The small party reached a large gray hatch that was marked Storage Area 3. One of the Ogrons thumbed a panel on the wall and the small hatch swung slowly open. It revealed a small room filled with racks of crates and boxes. A single strip light flickered, casting a winking gridded shadow over the faces of the three prisoners as they were thrown roughly inside. The hatch shut with a definite-sounding clunk. The doctor tapped at the hatch with the tip of his fingers.
It's megalomanium. Even K9'd have trouble cutting through it.
His hand, which had been scrabbling instinctively for the sonic screwdriver, emerged from his pocket. Romana sunk despondently onto one of the boxes. Things don't seem to be going very well, do they? The doctor smiled.
I wouldn't say that. They may have got us where they want us, and their plans may be proceeding smoothly, and we may have become separated from any effective means of resistance, but No, you're right. Things aren't going very well, are they?
He joined her on the box. Stokes broke his long silence with a whimper.
You think you're very clever, don't you?
Romana looked over at him. He was standing on the other side of the room, twitching one leg like a horse at a starting post. The excesses of the past few hours had left him crumpled and forlorn, and his large face shone with sweat under the intermittent fluorescence.
The both of you, he went on, sat there looking pleased with yourselves. All this ridiculous running about. You seem to find it very amusing.
Romana said calmly, I can assure you we do not. But there's no point in losing your head. Try to relax. He shuddered.
Are you insane?
He hammered on the wall.
We're all going to die here.
Romana crossed the small room in 2 long strides and grabbed Stokes by the shoulders. Stokes, listen to me. We'll find a way out of here, but you have to keep your nerve. Stokes wriggled free from her grip and flopped down in a corner.
Oh, leave me alone,
he said pathetically.
Please just leave me alone.
Romana turned to the doctor. Well? What is the way out? He hitched up his scarf.
I'll think of something.
The survey room at the center of the base was cramped and dark. Contoured charts of the planet's surface shifted into new patterns on the row of screens set into one wall, a display of weather movements from distant areas provided through a network of relays. The consoles and computer banks always found in such places were beneath the screens. Broad-shouldered shadows were thrown onto the walls as the brothers prepared a group of Ogrons for the next stage of the operation. Eddie unpacked the third helmet and passed it to Gjork. The leading Ogron clamped it down on his head. It connected automatically with a loud hiss to the clips on the neck of Gjork's Atmos suit. Gjork and 2 others were now suited up and ready to begin the mining operation. During the long wait for Zaius' signal, Eddie had trained these 3 specimens with the mining gear. The Ogron's willingness to learn and practical skill, qualities that were a legacy of their confused evolution, were a considerable asset in a slave race. All set, Eddie reported. Charlie sat before the main computer display. The base's drinks machine had provided a cup of tepid coffee, from which he took measured sips.
Right, get down to the airlock. Take the probe.
Eddie was confused. We don't need the probe. Zaius is going to tell us where to set up the rigs. Charlie patted the seat next to his in invitation. Eddie joined him before the console and was greeted with a powerful pinch on the arm.
It's a good job Mum and Dad aren't here, you know,
Charlie said as he loosened his grip.
What would they think of you, boy? Zaius is going to tell us where to set up the rigs. You don't think that's your trouble. No sense.
He leaned closer to his luckless brother and whispered,
With the probe, we can have a good look at this planet for ourselves. Find out what she's really after.
Well, we're going to kill her anyway, aren't we? Eddie protested. Charlie nodded and reached for a nearby box.
Yes.
He pushed open the lid of the box and produced one of the bombs.
Let's get this set up.
The bomb fitted snugly between the console and a freestanding unit beneath. Charlie pushed a tiny button on one side of the device, and a red light flashed on. Eddie jumped up. It's not going to go off, is it?
Not yet.
Charlie closed the lid of the box.
But now it's armed, so whenever I'm ready, I can detonate.
He leant back in his chair.
Right. Get down to the airlock. Proceed as drilled.
Eddie leapt up and selected a particular crate from the pile. He beckoned to the 3 Atmos-suited Ogrons. They followed him as he left the survey room and headed for the airlock. Spigot put out a hand to steady himself as the Rock of Judgment swayed slightly. A further series of bumps followed before the corridor steadied. Hey, was that what I hope it was? He asked K9. K9's antenna twitched and he replied,
I am unable to answer your question until you tell me what you hope for.
Well, I hope it was the Ogron ship splitting off.
It was what you hoped it was.
K9 said.
The Ogrons have left the Rock of Judgment. My sensors indicate that 2 transmat transmissions have been made recently. Inference is that Dr. Master and Mistress Romana, along with Zaius and the Nisbet brothers, have used Transmat to reach Planet 11.
Let's get after them then, Spigot said. The Transmat's only down one level from here.
Unnecessary.
K9 said primly.
Travel by TARDIS, more efficient.
Oh, not that stupid box. K9 trundled off towards the nearest lift without comment. Stokes was slumped in his corner. He looked over resentfully at the doctor and Romana. She was sighing, he was staring ahead and cogitating in that irritating way of his. She sighed again.
Romana, will you stop that, please?
Stop what?
Sighing.
All right, but I feel so helpless sitting here. She slid off the crate and her eyes widened. Doctor? He stayed still.
Yes?
What have you been sitting on all this time? What have we been sitting on all this time?
Our bottoms.
She pulled him away from the crate and pointed to stenciled lettering stamped where they had been sitting. Stokes peered across. The letters read, Danger. Blasting materials. As one, the doctor and Romana prized the lid off the crate. Stokes shuffled over to them.
What have you got there?
The doctor whirled round. He held up a small red device decorated with a couple of yellow stripes and said,
Our deliverance, Mr. Stokes. A Z7 Hermite pack. This little beauty packs a punch that'll blast our way out of here.
In a space as small as this, it might also blow us to pieces, Romana pointed out.
Well, have you got any better ideas?
The doctor said bullishly. It is my idea, Romana said.
Well then, you should feel very proud. Now then.
He examined the controls attached to the blast pack.
This must be the timer. I'll give it a few minutes.
He twisted a dial and fixed the pack to the hatch.
I suggest we all get behind the crate.
Bra, home planet of the Ogrons, was a massive gray ball some light years from the central spaceways. The bulky Ogron frame had been designed for the high gravity of that enormous world, and was well equipped for the deadening atmosphere of Planet 11. Gjork and his two colleagues moved through the thick grime with powerful, loping strides, the tough rubber joints of their atmosuits creaking at the knees. Gjork had been drilled in the use of some of his suit's more basic functions, and he stopped to consult his wrist readouts. A line of neon numbers glowed beneath a panel that was kept clean by an automatic sprinkler.
Stop!
Gjork told the others.
We have walked enough meters now. Unpack the probe.
One of the others slung a carrying case from his shoulder and unclipped a row of bolts on its side. The lid whirred up and the Ogrons removed the probe, a fat silver tube about half a meter long that was packed with sensor circuitry of the highest caliber. The tube tapered to a snout at the front and a couple of glowing red power packs were attached to the rear. Gjork reached over and took the device. He pressed a button on the snout and it tingled against his gloved hand. Carefully, he bent over and angled the probe like a spear at a soft piece of ground nearby. It beeped 3 times and shot from his grip into the slimy soil, disappearing within seconds. Gjork nodded pleased and opened his communicator frequency.
Mr. Charles, Gjork here. I have activated the probe as you ordered at...
He consulted his wrist readout again.
Distance of 1401.
Good,
said Charlie. He checked the position of the Ogron mining team on the map of the locality displayed above him and made an approving noise. That was far enough out from the more solid ground where the base had been built for a general reading to be trusted.
Were there any complications?
He asked Gjork.
No complications,
Gjork replied.
We wait for probe to come back now, yes sir?
That's right. Call back upon its return. Out.
Charles heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Zaius, who must have overheard the exchange. She stiffened and threw back her head.
You've sent down a probe? Why? There is nothing of value in this region.
The far door hissed open and Eddie walked in.
It won't hurt to have a look, though, he told Zaius. Just a general survey of the region, to see what's about.
You are wasting time, said Zaius. There is nothing here.
Charlie took a checker-patterned vacuum flask from a crate and unscrewed its lid. His nostrils twitched at the tempting vapors of the steamy broth within.
"Look, Eddie says. We're just having a look. No harm in that."
He took a sip of broth.
"And we've got the gear, remember? You won't get far without it. From now on, you do as we say."
Zaius battled with the urge forming behind her eyes, a familiar, sticky hotness that was pushing at her brow and tugging at the pulses in her forehead. One glance could crush these recessives, but she had to remain calm. They had to remain allies until the rigs were set up and programmed and the Helicon gathered. It would take at least 2 months. 2 months of this. At least she had the lives of the doctor and his normal friends to feast upon while she waited. The lives of the brothers, though, were what she wanted. It would be so good to feel their agony and fear. She imagined Charlie's brain bursting through his head and suppressed a lustful chuckle. A louder roar burst over the rumble of the gas clouds. Eddie looked up. That must be the lads coming down. Charlie stood up.
"I've cleared security on the pad. Tell them they can set down."
Eddie nodded. "Base to Flock," he transmitted. "You're clear for landing." Zaius watched as Charlie noted Pierpoint's silent presence in the survey room for the first time. The old judge had slipped in behind her, his face still as ever.
"What's he doing here?"
Zaius faced Charlie.
Pierpoint has specialized knowledge, security codes and the like. We may need him.
She noted Charlie's suspicious expression.
Don't worry, my eyes are upon him at all times. He can do nothing.
Charlie frowned and stalked away. Pierpoint's hand moved down to the bulge in his tabard where his laser pistol was concealed.
"No,"
he whispered to Zaius with a glance at the brothers. She curled a hand over his and said,
No, not yet.
The boom of the ancient spitting motors of the landing Ogron ship concealed the detonation of the Hermite pack as it blew open the hatch of Storage Area 3. Despite Romana's fears, the Hermite had exploded outwards into the corridor, leaving the occupants of the storage area unscathed. The doctor's head popped up from behind the crate and he removed his fingers from his singing ears.
"There we are."
Romana looked up and blinked away the smoke from her eyes. A pleasantly sized hole had been blasted in the hatch. Flames danced around the glowing edge of the gap. "Well done, Doctor." He leapt up and made for the hole, but stopped as if he had forgotten his manners.
"Please, ladies first."
Romana nipped through the scorching ring of fire and called back, "It's all right, Doctor. It's quite safe." He followed her, dusted himself down, and rearranged his scarf.
"I know it's safe."
The doctor turned at the sound of Stokes's voice.
"Where are you two going now?"
he asked from the other side of the hole.
"Well, we're going to defeat Zaius, of course," said the doctor. "Or try to."
"Why don't you stay here?" suggested Romana. Stokes took a little run up and jumped through the hatch.
"Oh no,"
he said, looking up and down the corridor.
"No, I shall return to the Transmat. As would you if you had any sense remaining to you at all."
Romana frowned. "Don't be ridiculous. The rock's probably drifted out of range by now." Stokes backed away. He appeared genuinely afraid of them.
"It doesn't matter. I'm prepared to take a chance. I'd rather I was scattered painlessly into the ether than have my spleen squeezed until it pops by a gang of psychopaths."
He gave Romana a little wave.
"Farewell, my angel. I wish only that your level of sanity was equal to the magnitude of your attractiveness."
He looked less fondly at the doctor and added,
"You are obviously as mad as you appear."
Romana watched as he scurried off. "Doctor, we can't just let him go like that." The doctor was already striding in the opposite direction.
"I think we just have. Now which way to survey control, I wonder?"
No, this has got to be some sort of trick, said Spigot as he entered the brightly lit control room of the TARDIS. He looked back at the big white double doors, which were decorated with a pattern of indented circular panels. He was sure the door he pushed open had been wooden and blue, and had belonged to a box large enough to hold 4 people at most. There was only one way to check. He stepped back through the white doors, and was back in the cavern, standing in front of a tall, blue box. He pushed open the door, stepped through slowly, and he was in a huge white room. No, this has got to be some sort of trick. You've got a teleporter rigged up or something, yeah? K9 whirred forward.
Please mind the doors.
The big white doors swung shut with a low electronic hum. Spigot shook his head and marveled at his new surroundings. So, this is your TARDIS, eh? I guess I was wrong to doubt you. But how do you get... He waved a hand about. All of this inside that little box. He gestured to the hexagonal control console, which bulged with knobs, switches, and levers of various shapes and colors. And how does it all work?
Relative dimensional stabilizer maps interior dimensions onto exterior outlets.
K9 replied.
Number of relational components of TARDIS inestimable. Therefore, detailed report on its workings is unavailable.
A particular device at the base of one of the console panels caught Spigot's eye. It was a golden grill with a couple of switches at either end. Ah, right, he said, stretching out a hand. This'll be a guidance and local hazard warning system. Looks like it anyway.
Caution!
K9 squeaked.
Do not touch TARDIS controls or I may be forced to stun you. Unauthorized handling of systems is very dangerous.
Spigot withdrew his hand. I get it. Like only the doctor knows how to fly this thing, yeah? K9 replied.
I am fully integrated to TARDIS systems. I will operate this flight by remote.
He beeped a signal, and the central column of the console began to rise and fall. An unearthly trumpeting noise sounded from deep within the console. And I thought I'd seen it all, said Spigot. This could be a fun ride. Stokes scampered along the darkened corridors of the survey base. Hearing guided him away from the side of the base where he judged the Ogron ship to have docked. The thought of bumping into a horde of those rampaging brutes in pitch blackness was not comforting. At every one of the creaks and rumbles that rattled the metalwork about him, his head jerked up, his nostrils twitched, and he flushed a deeper shade of purple. This beastly place was alive with shadows, muffled noises, and the distant conversations of the shuffling dead. A ghost base, a snare for the souls of the gruesomely dispatched miners. Perhaps, thought Stokes, slippery hands twisting, there was something on this planet, a dark, ancient force more powerful than death itself. Something that could hide in the dark, something that could lurk in the mind, feeding off your fear, something you could never shake away. A twisted white thing, spattered with warm blood, with 30 eyes and 7 giant claws. At the moment, it was content to rattle a panel or shake a loose inspection covering or two, just to let him know it was about. It would strike later, when it had brought him to his knees. A tap on the shoulder, he would turn. There it would be, half covered by shadow. It would jab its claws into his chest and bring out his beating heart, sink its teeth into his head and suck the juices from his brain. It was worse than Zaius or the Nisbet brothers ever could be. Worse than Vental, the 3-headed killer of the lower city. Worse than Strapping Jack or the Zinktown cobbler. Perhaps it was here. He could feel its breath on his neck, but of course when he turned around, it had dashed back into cover. It was playing with him. He had to escape from it, get through the door up ahead, set the timer on the transmat, climb up and disappear. His outstretched fingers felt along the cold metal wall, leading him around obstacles that his failing eyesight could not detect. He had bumped into something and cried out, but it was only an abandoned trolley. Alarmed by his own cry of distress, he ran recklessly ahead in a wobbling frenzy. A shaft of light fell over the door at the end of the corridor, now only a few meters away. Yes, this was the transmat. He threw himself forward onto the metal hatchway. The door to the transmat chamber refused to open. It was sealed. Stokes thumbed the opening panel, but it failed to respond. Stokes' vision started to wheel. He shook. His legs almost gave way. He tottered from wall to wall, desperate to stay upright. Hunger and fear and exhaustion were pressing him down. Shivering pangs of fever creased his shoulder blades. His mind and body were screaming for rest. He was transformed into a creature compounded wholly of terror. He stumbled away, choking and spluttering. There had to be somewhere to hide, somewhere safe, away from this madness. Romana tapped the doctor on the shoulder as he sped down the corridor. "What are we going to do when we get to the survey room, Doctor?" He stopped, and she almost cannoned into him.
"Stop, Zaius. I think the Nisbet brothers ought to be told a few truths."
"Is that wise? We don't know how they'll react." The doctor shook his head.
"No, we don't. We'll just have to hope, won't we?"
He ran ahead again. A bubble of mud swelled up and burst over the boots of the mining Ogrons. The probe shot back a second later, now coated in glistening blue soil. Gjork caught it and wiped clean the snout-nosed end. He reported to the base.
Gjork to Mr. Charles. Probe is back.
Zaius tapped a foot.
"This is unnecessary. Why are we wasting time?"
Eddie frowned. Wait. Just stand there and wait. Charlie put down his soup and brought out the probe's relay unit, a large red box, from a crate. He flipped up a small screen and a series of results started to flash up. Portazol, 0.00000012%. Guminum, 0.000000000003%. Vibleus, 0.00000000000000000014%. Balls ore, 0.0000000000000000000023%. Belzite, 0.00000000000000000006%. Helicon, residual?
There,
said Charlie, satisfied.
not much we didn't expect.
He turned to Zaius, who was studying the probe's findings over his shoulder.
Right. You'd better give us the coordinates for these mountains, then, and we'll get the lads sent out.
Zaius raised a hand as he made to close the screen down.
"Wait, the Helicon. Explain the reading for Helicon."
Eddie shrugged. It could be a freak reading for this area. It doesn't matter.
"A residual trace of Helicon?"
said Zaius.
"Impossible. Jerrigan Volt's initial report estimated Helicon at 1.3% of planetary mass. A residual trace suggests that the Helicon has been sucked away by selectively programmed mining bugs."
She turned to Pierpoint.
"Yes?"
He looked away.
The reading must be false.
Zaius clenched her fists.
"No! What has happened here? Where is the Helicon?"
Curious, Spigot removed one of the doctor's coats from the stand in the TARDIS control room and examined the label inside. H.J. Barber and Son, Aylesbury, he read out. Aylesbury? Isn't that one of the outer worlds?
Aylesbury unimportant.
K9 replied.
TARDIS now entering hover mode. Activating force field.
There was a slight change in the ambient hum of the TARDIS's engines. The central column rose to its full height and stopped. Have we arrived then? Asked Spigot. K9 trundled forward officiously and operated the shutters over the scanner. Spigot saw a close view of the atmosphere of Planet 11, flecks of which were already starting to adhere to the scanner lens.
We are stationary above planet's surface,
said K9.
I will now carry out a sensor survey to locate mining base.
What about the atmospheric interference? Spigot asked. Nobody's ever surveyed this planet from space. It's impossible.
Gallifreyan technology superior.
Lights on the input panel on K9's back started to flash, and his eye screen flickered as he interfaced with the TARDIS computer. The picture on the TARDIS scanner shifted into scan mode, and topographical details became visible. After a few seconds, a green light started to flash over one area. The focus sharpened, and Spigot made out a couple of familiar shapes. Ah, right. That'll be the survey base, and there's the Ogron's ship. An orange glow clung to the rear of the smaller object. It must have just touched down. There's still a heat shadow. He looked down at K9, who was still flashing and beeping anxiously. What's up? K9's tail wagged in bemusement.
TARDIS sensors register a secondary generator on planet's surface.
Don't be daft. It must be the distortion, playing up your fancy gala what's-it technology, said Spigot. There's nothing else down there. In reply, K9 pulled the scanner image back and zoomed in to another point. The enhancers strained to pierce the cover of a dense typhoon of gas. Peaks of a mountain range became visible, cramped and irregular. The spectrum of the image switched to negative, and Spigot saw it, a tiny patch of black against bright green. What is it?
Insufficient data. Structure has been built under cover of mountain range. Patina of energy traces suggests there is an impulse power generator beneath structure. Smaller energy trails also present. This suggests use of processing machinery.
Spigot rubbed his chin. What? Mining machinery?
That is possible.
K9 conferred again with the TARDIS.
I have completed a rapid mineralogical analysis of planet. There is evidence of recent extraction of mineral alloy RL-225, common name Helicon.
There are pirates down there, said Spigot. Got there before Zeus. It can't be one of the big companies, but who the hell would have the money to build a place like that down there? And what do they want with the Helicon anyway? He knelt down and addressed K9. Hey, why don't we take a nose at that place, eh? Give it the once-over.
Your idioms are not in my phraseology bank,
said K9.
If your suggestion is to travel to the mining base, I have already programmed a suitable course.
This cannot be!
Zeus screeched. She threw the probe relay down and advanced on Charlie.
Your equipment has malfunctioned.
Charlie folded his arms and stared back implacably.
Does it matter, eh? Who needs Helicon?
He signaled to Eddie.
Perhaps you'd like to tell us why you're getting upset about it.
Eddie leveled his revolver at Zeus's back. Pierpoint, watching from the corner, reached for his own pistol.
Because I like to have all the facts, dear,
Charlie went on.
I like to have everything tidy and on the table and in its place. So tell me, why are you so interested in Helicon?
One glance from my eyes,
and you are dead,
Zeus warned. Her voice was becoming louder and more tremulous.
I merely wish assurance that your equipment is functioning correctly. If we are to proceed with the extraction of the Belzite, everything must be in good order.
So where is the Belzite?
Demanded Charlie. He spat out the last word of the sentence skeptically.
Tell us now. We fulfilled our part of the bargain.
The tension in the survey room had lessened for the moment. Eddie lowered his revolver. Pierpoint's hand moved away from his laser pistol. Zeus strode past Charlie and tapped out a series of figures into one of the consoles. A symbol flashed on the command map of the planet's surface.
There. The Jilharo Mountains. The range is almost impassable, but your Ogrons can reach the seam, I'm sure. All they have to do is set up mini-rigs at 5 points. I will program them by remote, and the Belzite seam will be extracted and refined in 2 months.
At last, said Eddie. He moved towards the communicator. I'll call Gajork back in and brief him.
Wait a second.
Charlie raised the flat of one hand.
Zaius, there's another thing I want from you. The name of Sentinel.
Zaius laughed.
Do you think me such a fool? That information will be revealed to you only after the operation is over.
Then no deal, said Charlie. You're going to tell us now.
He raised his hand to the mask.
I don't like being kept behind. I've never had to do it before. I'm too old to start now.
Eddie raised his revolver again. Zaius snarled.
I'll tell you nothing until our business is complete.
The main door slid open, and the doctor and Romana breezed in. Hello, all.
Not you again,
Zaius exclaimed.
You're not very good at locking people up, are you? The doctor said politely. It's no wonder why you prefer to kill them. He turned to the brothers. Gentlemen, before either of you do anything rash, like shooting anybody, I think it's time you found out a few facts. He coughed. Romana?
Romana stepped forward. There isn't any Belzite on this planet, she said simply. We've seen a mineralogical survey. There's none here.
She's lying,
Zaius said.
Believe nothing the girl says.
She's an investigator.
Charlie turned his black eyes on Zaius.
They expect me to be surprised.
We know that, said Eddie, his mouth trembling with confusion and anger. But this mountain range, what's she after there? It's got to be worth something.
Only to her, said the doctor. You see, Zaius is interested in Helicon, which I dare say is to be found in the mountains, but isn't going to be much use to you, unless you're thinking of going into the pipeline-making business.
Zaius, torn between priorities, swung her face towards him. An orange beam shot from her eyes, and he sank to the ground slowly, hands covering his face. Doctor! cried Romana. Nobody puts one over on us! Eddie aimed his revolver at Zaius and steadied his trembling gun arm. Aware of his action, Zaius turned instinctively, freeing the doctor from the deadly beam of her eyes. Eddie fired. The shot went wide of Zaius. Zaius' angry stare transfixed Eddie. The revolver fell from his hand. The beam of pure hate lifted him off his feet. His eyes bulged with agony. A second later, what was left of his body squelched to the floor. Charlie pulled out his own revolver from his jacket and fired 4 bullets into Zaius. She was thrown back by each blast, but still clung to life, the mask forcing her on.
Fool!
She screamed. Romana helped the doctor to his feet. They watched as Charlie fired another 3 bullets into Zaius' chest. Bloody holes opened up all over her white tunic. Still, she advanced.
Do you think you can kill me?
She taunted Charlie. The lips of the mask moved. The face of Zaius lived again. It twisted into an expression of grotesque, silver hate.
I exist,
the mask shouted.
The transfer is complete. I cannot be destroyed.
More bullets tore into the body beneath the mask. It crumpled and fell in a gruesome red heap. The mask screamed its defiance and closed its eyes. Charlie ignored the doctor and Romana and moved to the smashed remains of his brother. No, he said through gritted teeth. No, not Ed. Me own. He faltered at the sight of the splattered body. Me own flesh and blood. I'll bring the lot of them down for this. His eyes glistened. The whole lot of them. On the other side of the survey room, the doctor was picking himself up. Are you all right? Asked Romana. I think so, he said. He blinked rapidly and wiggled his fingers. Yes, I think I had a narrow escape. Pierpoint had remained perfectly still during the blood-soaked altercations of the last few minutes. Suddenly, he sprang into life. He leapt across the survey room, bent over the body of Zaius, and ripped off the mask. Where are you off to with that? The doctor called. Pierpoint fired 2 beams from his laser pistol in the doctor's general direction and sped out of the survey room. The doctor shuddered.
It's just as well, Romana, that the people who try to kill me are all such bad shots.
They looked down at the body of Margot. Romana knelt and turned it over. The arm flopped pathetically. Where the mask had been, where the face should have been, was a flat lump of pink flesh. There were no features. Romana recoiled. What happened to her?
She was absorbed, the doctor said sadly. Zaius transferred totally.
He shook his head.
The powers of activated Helicon are more terrible than even I had dared to imagine.
He indicated the door.
Let's get after him.
Romana ran from the room, picking her way around the corpse of Eddie. The doctor turned for a last look at the survey room. Charlie's massive hand clamped on his shoulder. The other hand still held the smoking revolver that had stopped Zaius.
Scum, Charlie spat. Why don't I shoot your knees away right now?
The doctor backed away, but the grip on his arm was alarmingly strong.
Please,
he said, trying to sound as sincere as possible.
I understand how you must feel, but you don't want to do anything hasty. I mean, it's always better to allow for a sensible interval of grief before taking any rash action. After all, you're not one of those people who gets into a rage and starts killing whoever happens to be about.
A moist clicking sound came from the back of Charlie's throat.
Well, perhaps you are, said the doctor.
Pierpoint kept to the better lit areas of the base and followed them to a round junction halfway along one of the outer arms. The mind that had kept ahead through 40 years of deliberation in the service of the law had already formulated a new plan to cope with the altered situation. If this base had been constructed to standard design, the section he was searching for would be just here. An open door ahead led to a room that smelt of fuel fluids. He stepped through and saw his own face reflected in the plastic glass window of the base's skimmer. He looked about. Neatly arranged on a rail nearby were a row of protective suits. He set the mask down on a work surface and pulled at the laces of his tunic. In under a minute he had changed into one of the featureless gray plastic suits. His own clothes he kicked away into a corner.
Pierpoint,
a voice whispered. He looked down and licked his lips. The mask was speaking to him. Its eyes had opened and its lips were pouting. Without a host to draw from, its voice was high-pitched and metallic, pure and chiming.
Pierpoint, you know what you must do. You will never learn the secret of Helicon unless you wear my face.
He took a pair of gray gloves from a pouch on the suit and pushed his hands into them. Then he picked up the mask by its edge and held it away from him as if it were radioactive.
No,
he told Zaius.
There is an alternative.
Yes,
said the mask.
Yes, bring me another host.
The sound of tentative footsteps came from the corridor outside the garage. Pierpoint crept over to the door and looked out. The girl Romana was standing in the middle of the corridor, her hands on her hips, looking about. Pierpoint, she called. You may as well show yourself. The operation's over. Pierpoint felt the mask jerk in his hand.
Yes,
it whispered.
Yes.
He stepped from the garage and advanced on Romana. She whipped around to face him and saw instantly what he intended to do. He gripped her by the shoulder and tried to bring the mask forward. Her strength was surprising, and her long legs kicked at his midriff. If they had fought under more usual circumstances, she would undoubtedly have come off better. But the mask was too strong. It gave Pierpoint greater strength and determination. He pushed Romana against the wall. held her there, and pressed the mask over her face. The cap fell from her hair. She flinched, slumped, and was still.